Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. So this is a continuation of the roughing out marathon, and this week we're actually going to mount the pieces on the lathe, turn the outside diameters on them, do some coring, and just get them ready for the drying shed. So that's what this week's video is. Along with that, I want to try and do some hollowing. We'll see how long this video goes. And I also would like to bring in some of the hickory from out in the yard and mount that on the lathe because I've never turned hickory before either. So that's this video. If you haven't watched the first video, I would recommend watching that before watching this one, and that way things might make more sense to you. Anyway, if you haven't been here before, thanks for stopping by, and of course, anytime anybody can give me a thumbs up on my videos, it certainly helps with the analytics. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that because I give away bowls every 5,000 subscribers. So the sooner that I can build my subscriber count, the more bowls I'll give away. All right, well, that's it. Let's go over and have a look and see what we're going to mount on the lathe this week. All right, so this is what was roughed out in the first video, at least to this stage. So there's some ash here, butternut, walnut, and box elder burl. Good example of it. Tons of little spikes. This one looks to be fairly solid, and we should be able to do something with it. But this one up here, I know it's kind of rotten. It's got some pretty deep cracks in it. So I don't know. We'll have to have a look at that. It may have to be dried that way and then done with resin in order to save that piece. But anyway, let's get some pieces mounted on the lathe, and I'll show you how I line up the grain. All right, so I thought I would cover this in case you haven't been here before and you're new at wood turning. So this is a 5/8 hole that I've drilled. This is where the foot is going to be on this bowl. This is the live center that's on my tailstock. And this is a spring-loaded spur drive that comes from one way. It goes into your stronghold chuck. So lining up the grain is important. That way the bowl looks balanced. All right, so once you get your blank mounted on the lathe, you know, you've got sapwood and heartwood and sapwood, and especially this is white ash. It's really nice to have this line up so that the bowl looks balanced when you're looking at it. So what I like to do is just take my banjo, put it underneath, you know, where the bowl is, and spin the bowl blank and ensure that it lines up. So as that goes along, you can probably see that it looks actually pretty good. Come down just a touch. And that's where it's nice to have that spring-loaded pin in there. You can manipulate this to get it lined up perfectly. So there. That's lined up perfectly. That way the bowl will look balanced after it's been turned.
I certainly always try to balance every bowl that I put on the lathe. You know, it's not a make or break situation a lot of times, but you know, if I can balance out a bowl so that it looks even across the top and the heartwood and the sapwood line up, that's certainly a preferred way of doing it. And of course, here I'm using a 5/8 Bowl Gouge from David Ellsworth, and you know, you'll see in this video, I really try to take as big as cuts as I can without stalling my lathe. There's no money in roughing out, there's only money in finishing. So the sooner you can get your roughing done, you can move on to finishing and, you know, in theory, make more money. This is white ash, and I personally find white ash cuts very nicely. And as you can see, I'm taking some pretty big cuts there.
Just trying to remove the pith. Just got a little bit of it left here. A little bit of a crack left here too, so we're going to come down probably about another 1/2 inch. That's not a crack. And I think we'll be all right. I really do like the ash with the two-tone sapwood and heartwood. Really like the look of it.
And I'll talk about removing cracks in the pith that's left or the very center of the tree. If you leave that in your work, if there's a crack in your work, yes, you can seal it up with CA glue. There's a chance that it won't migrate. But up near the top of the bowl, that's where the most movement's going to be when the bowl dries. And if that's the case, guarantee you that crack is going to open up and it's going to be larger. So contrary to popular belief, I don't want my wooden bowls to crack. You know, you see me use all these inlay techniques here on this channel, but that's in an effort to save the bowl. And so, you know, I prefer bowls that don't have any cracks in it, and then that way I can just do an inlay in the rim, which I'm mostly known for. And here, you know, you see me cutting in the tenon there. I'm not a fan of internal mortises, expanding your jaws into them. I find that they tend to crack a lot more than any of these tenons. Every now and then I'll lose a bowl because the tenon breaks off. And actually what I was using there was like a go, no-go gauge for tenon size to make sure that that size tenon is going to fit the chuck when the bowl's done, or when the outside's done.
There you go. Just going to knock these little nubs off. Get some end grain sealer on it. And it'll be ready for corn. So I made the comment on one of my roughing videos that I was using a hammer with this chisel, which is metal on metal, which you're not supposed to do. And that I would get around to turning a mallet one of these days. Well, lo and behold, this showed up in the mail. This is from Weatherman Tom, and he's subscribed to the channel. It did have a bigger flange on the back, and it was a little bigger in diameter. So, you know, I don't have really big hands, so I turned it to fit me. And it's made of Osage orange, something that I've never turned before, so that was neat. And yeah, well, thanks Tom, I really appreciate it. Let's see how it works here. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to put Anchor Seal on. Anchor Seal is a liquid wax that dries clear. There's some on that bowl over there. And it just slows down the release of moisture out of the wood. That way it helps prevent cracking. You can use a little roller. You can use a brush. It's whatever you prefer. Sometimes I find these rollers are actually easier than the brushes. Anyway, it's called an end grain sealer, but I put it on everything. I don't just do the end grain. That way these bowls could sit here for, you know, weeks on end. And as long as the outside has been sealed with the Anchor Seal, then I'm not in a huge hurry to get them processed. I typically, when I'm roughing out, like to do all the outside profiles on all the bowls that I'm doing with, you know, that series of turning. And then once all the outside profiles are done, then I'll core them or remove the insides, whatever. So anyway, I highly recommend this product. I am not affiliated with them. I realize it's not cheap, but this is the most effective way to keep your bowls from cracking.
So this is Butternut, and Butternut is softer than ash, considerably softer than ash. But oddly enough, it seems to be more abrasive on your tools. I'm not sure if the tree picks up some sand as it grows or what the deal is with that, but I do find it to be quite abrasive. It is protected here in Ontario. It's dying of what's called butternut canker, and you can't harvest a tree unless it's dead. So it's unfortunate, but a lot of our woods are dying of either funguses or, of course, the emerald ash borer, which came from China, has just been devastating the ash trees. This ash tree that I got didn't die because of the ash borer. It was overhanging a house. But we're here in Canada, we've got a lot of trees in real big trouble.
Okay, I just wanted to point out something on this butternut. This is pretty much how I want all of my bowls to work out. As you can see, the at the top of the bowl, the size of the rings is pretty much the same on each side of the bowl. And this bowl is pretty much flawless. It doesn't have the spiderweb pattern that you see in butternut, and hopefully some of the butternut we got will give us that. So anyway, I certainly will show you that if it shows up. But anyway, that's how a balanced bowl should look.
And the never-ending cleanup. The problem with these shavings, they either have butternut or walnut in them, and you cannot get rid of them to farmers or anything like that. So it is purely compost or mulch. That's kind of one of the real big drawbacks on working with walnut or butternut, because apparently it is toxic to livestock. This is our fantastic box elder burl that's on here. Very few of these pieces that came off of that tree that I did in the yard before the video before this were able to be turned. Deep cracks in them, a lot of rot, a lot of bugs. So, you know, there's a bunch of them that are in the kiln now that I certainly would be able to do something with, but they're going to pretty much all require resin pours in order to save them, including this piece, because it has got a lot of dry rot in it. It is super light, but it is a fantastic looking piece of wood. It's also important at this stage to remove any bark or any kind of whatever's left behind, because that bark will in no doubt have critters in it, and of course you don't want them to eat your wood after it's in the drying shed.
What a piece of wood. Beautiful spalt lines, bird's eye, spikes, some red in it. The only problem is that goes way in there, and I'm not sure if it's going to be safe enough to turn. This tenon here really isn't the greatest. I don't know, we'll have to see. Might have to seal it up and leave it the way it is and then cast it in resin at a later date. That'd be pretty neat when it's all filled in with resin though.
No, I'm not squeezing grapes for the grape juice to make wine. Just trying to make more room in the trailer. It was actually the end of the day.
Yeah, this is so rotten. I originally was going to grab this with the chuck. What I think I'm going to do is just straighten this off, and we'll dry this as it is and then cast it in resin. That's the only way to save this piece, because this is just completely rotten down here. But man, I don't want to lose this awesome burl figure. Look at it. Anyway, that's what I'm doing.
All right, so that's our outside profiles done on all of our bowl blanks. I decided to anchor seal these ones. This one I'm not going to. I want to see how badly it cracks. If it cracks, these are fairly dry compared to if it was just cut off the stump, it'd be soaking wet. But you know, you can even tell by the surface that it's actually quite dry. So yeah, there's a few here that we're going to core for sure. We're going to core probably most of them. This one, obviously this one's probably not going to be done. Should be able to get something on that smaller one. But anyway, hollow forms are next. Way over there. So if you're curious what I was doing there, I was just showing that when I like to mount these pieces that have the pith in them, that it's mounted pith to pith. That way, if you're making a hollow form, you can actually remove the top part of the hollow form. You can get rid of that pith area, and that way the pith is in the base of the bowl. And that, of course, can be sealed up. And if it cracks, you can actually remove it and do an inlay in it, like whatever. Again, cutting in a tenon here, using the go, no-go gauge to make sure that it fits my chuck. All right, so if you're noticing this tenon is smaller, I actually made all 4 of these smaller. The larger tenon, while it certainly has probably better gripping strength in the chuck, was going to affect our design. So I went with the smaller tenon, and hopefully we don't have any issues. And I'll just touch on production here. So when I do a batch like this, I'll mount them all between centers, basically true them up, put a tenon on the bottom of them. That way you're not reconfiguring your lathe and all that kind of business there. You want to, from a production standpoint, the more times you have to take chucks off and put chucks on and change stuff around, it's really going to affect your production. So I always like to turn them all between centers, get the tenons on them, then I'll mount them back in the chuck, do the outside profiles, and you know, for me it makes more sense to do that like that, and it's faster. And earlier I said that you could leave, you know, get rid of the pith on the top of the these are going to be urns. But in this case, you know, I've cut it off and I've kept it. I may not necessarily use it in the future, but if I want to, it's the piece that will go with that urn so that it matches. All right, so this will be our lid, possibly our lid. I might go with something else. But when I do these, if I can, I'll cut off the very top part of it and then reuse it when this is dry. In a perfect world, I would carry on with hollowing right now, but by the time I set up my rig and tear it down, every time I got to do one of these, do the outside profile of these, it makes no sense. So from a production standpoint, I'll take this off, put it aside, and I'll number them so that I know which one goes to which, and I'll do all the outside profiles, and then I'll hollow them. All right, so there's an example of what goes on the bottom, and then this is what goes on the bottom of the lid, so there's no confusion. 6 months to a year from now. This is just a few short clips of me cutting the very tops of these urns off. And like I said, maybe I'll use these lids, maybe I won't. So the client that I'm doing all this ash for showed up with 2 more blocks of it yesterday. So I figure I might as well do those 2. And on the bottom, in the first video, this is supposed to be hickory. Again, I've never turned it before. So I want to cut a block off of that, and we'll do a couple of bowls of that and should be able to get 1 core out of it. And if you've turned hickory, and we'll get a better look at it after it's been turned, let me know if you think that's what it is, because I never have. So anyway, I guess we got some more to do before we go do any coring. Now hickory does grow here in Ontario, up in this growing area. I've never seen it, and I'm originally from the east coast of Canada, And I've never seen it there. If I've seen it, it certainly hasn't been stuff that's been big enough to harvest and to make bowls out of anyway. Or maybe I've seen it and I just didn't know what it was. So here's the other half of that mystery wood. I'm just going to zoom this in. What's our mystery wood? Is it hickory or not? All right, so if you're curious to do those 6 bowls you see right here, took an hour and 20 minutes. So anyway, I'll throw some acre seal on these and we will get to coring finally. All right, so before we start coring, I just want to lay this out for you so you know what's going on. This is a 14-inch bowl blank. So that means I'm going to be using my number 3 cutter. That's going to be the largest cutter that I'm going to be using when I core this, this block out. So I've laid this out. Now, a rule of thumb is 1 inch for every 10 inches in diameter. This is 14 inches across. I just called it 1.5 inches, so that's what this first line is. And of course, this line here is the width of our cutter, which is 3/8 of an inch in width. So this is my number 2, but I'm using my number 3 spacer to ensure I don't go through the bottom of the big money bowl that's on the outside. Coring a huge maple burl and cherry crotch coring video. I lay this out very well if you're really curious how to use this setup. And I should also mention that this is the one-way setup from One Way Manufacturing. And as you can see, it's a captive system. You have supports that go in with it. Again, different supports for the different knives. So we'll take the first bowl out. Once everything is locked in place, I try to square up the jig on the bed so that it's square to the bed of the lathe. We'll take out our first bowl, take out our number 2, reset the base, put the number 3 rig in with its support, put it where you want it, lock it down, and then we'll take out the second bowl. And of course, because these bowls don't have a profile exactly like this, the outside bowl you're going to have to do a little bit of trimming on to make sure it's got even wall thickness. Anyway, check out the huge maple burl and cherry crotch coring video if it's confusing to you. I know it was the first time that I actually went through it, so I certainly understand if those are confused at home. One Way Manufacturing in their media section has it laid out extremely well if you're curious as well. And I do highly recommend this coring rig that you can get from them. I should also mention that my lathe is on its highest torque setting. You need a fair bit of power to do this. So I've got it on the highest torque setting. That's 525. Now, when it comes to coring, you do need a lathe with some power. I don't know if you could core with a 1 horsepower motor or not. I've never tried it. This is a 2 horsepower motor on this General, and I can easily stall the motor on this lathe. Especially the further you get from center, the more mechanical advantage you have. So, you know, sharpening the cutter is really, really key in keeping it sharp. And usually you have to do that after 2 or 3 bowls that you do, or cores that you do. And you just keep pushing the support in to support the cutter as it enters the wood. That way there's less tool bounce, and you just end up with a better core.
There's our first core. I've said this in previous videos. The only real problem I have with the system is the cutter itself. The cutter is not easy to sharp. It's got a really strange point on it. I actually have all of the sharpening jigs that you can buy from One Way to do the sharpening. But the cutter life to me is probably not as good as I really would like to see it. And the sharpening itself, the point has a really weird shape to it, so that's difficult to get right. And yeah, the cutter life is just probably a big thing. They do make carbide cutters, but of course you have to have a diamond wheel set up in order to sharpen them, and they're not cheap as well. And I did actually buy 2 carbide cutters. I bought 3 actually, and 2 of them broke. And I can't really explain that, and neither could One Way. Maybe it was just a bad batch of steel. I don't know. But, you know, that is really the only knock I've got on the system. But without this system, regardless of the cost of the cutters, you are not going to get all these extra bowls. Yeah, so that first bowl was actually butternut, and here we're doing walnut, and walnut is a lot harder than butternut is, for sure. And sometimes I find the harder woods actually cut better than softer woods, and that's probably because they're not as stringy. Birch, I find, if the cutter, once the cutter starts to get a little dull, is a real kind of bear to do. And again, that's why it's so important to keep that cutter sharp, because the tendency is to push harder on the knife set, and that's never going to go your way because you may end up breaking the tenon off the base of the bowl. So if it's not cutting the way that it should be cutting, you've got to stop, take the cutter off, and try and resharpen it. You shouldn't have to strain when you're using this system. Yeah, this hickory, if this is hickory, actually cut very nicely. It is actually a very dense wood. Whatever this is, I'm assuming that it is hickory. Very heavy, very dense, and very hard. So, I mean, that would go along with the description of hickory. And you've seen that knot in the very top of that bowl. You know, I'm fine with leaving that stuff in there. Again, if you've been a subscriber to my channel, you know exactly what will happen to that knot. That'll get filled with resin or natural materials, whatever. It's a design opportunity. Yeah, this is white ash, and white ash cuts very nicely. It's a very straight grain wood. That's probably one of the main reasons why baseball bats were made with ash. I'm not sure if that's a normal thing now or not, given the fact that pretty much the northern U.S. has been wiped out of ash by the ash borer. Box elder burl. The great thing about burls with these voids is that you can actually put that cutter in quite a ways before you need to flip the arm around, the support arm, because it's got lots of areas to get rid of the shavings as it's spinning. And I was really happy I was able to hold the base of this and save this center bowl. I wasn't so sure that that was going to happen, but it certainly is a very nice little bowl.
So on to one of my more favorite tools in the shop, and this is my vacuum chuck. And you know, when I was doing these cores, when I was using the coring system, I could have put a tenon on the top side of this core and then flipped it around in a chuck, and you know, that's a way to affix it to the lathe. This vacuum chuck has more than enough vacuum pressure to hold that piece in place. You can turn a tenon on the bottom of it, clean up the outside of the bowl, and you know, it's a great tool. I really, it's one of the purchases that when I bought at the time, it wasn't cheap, but it has been worth its weight in gold. And here I'm actually flipping the entire piece around just to show you that you can actually core out the inside of these bowls with your vacuum chuck. And of course, this is that hickory, which is very hard and very dense. So if it can do it with this, it can do it with anything. All right, here's a little update. These still need to have anchor seal put on them, but they're done. These bowls here, they'll have to get the centers out of them. And in the back, we just need to remount these and trim them up, make sure that the wall thickness is correct. There's actually 61 bowls here, but you know, a lot of these are kind of like, nah, whatever. So, you know, really there's probably 45 really marketable bowls. So, you know, that's what you can do with a coring rig. Yeah, I just thought I'd show a couple of clips of this. These bowls are too big to be held with the vacuum chuck. So if they were dry, that would be a different story, but they're not. They're heavy and wet. And, well, no, this box elder burl, not so much, but anyway, I use the tenon on the base of them and my chuck to hold them, just to get them trued up so they're the same wall thickness throughout the whole bowl. That way you'll have less cracks when drying. Even wall thickness is the key to drying bowls, along with the anchor seal.
Pretty neat looking stuff. We'll say that it's very light. This will need a ton of resin to stabilize it. Anyway, I might even throw this right in the kiln now. And then that way we can do something with this probably in the next couple of weeks, really.
This is a big old chunky piece of butternut. I think it's something like 16 inches across, which is hard to find these days. It's not, of course, with it dying out, it's very tough to find good sized butternut. Again, checking the wall thickness is key. It is a very pretty wood. So before I put any anchor seal on, I always want to make sure that if there's any existing cracks, that I fill them with thin CA glue. And as you'll see, this is kind of tinted purple, and that's because I used that in my last video. So of course I don't want that to go to waste. So it's good for this. Yeah, it's tinted, but you know what, you'll never see it. And this actually bad piece in this rim might eventually get turned away. But this will limit how much cracking there is as the bowl dries. So make sure you use the thin CA glue. This is the stuff from Starbond. And of course, accelerator, set it in place. That way you can carry on with your project. Finally, moving on to hollow forms. What I've done here is taken an 1 7/8 inch bit, and you'll see in the video that, you know, again, this is a production thing. I'll take them all, drill them all out. The Jacob's truck is in the tailstock, so it doesn't make any sense to take that out and put something else in. Drill them all out at once, and then move on to whatever you need to do after that. All right, so this is my hollowing system, and it's a captive system made by One Way. There is a laser right here, and right now it is set to 1 inch. Can you pick that up? Yep. So it's set to 1 inch. We'll leave it for now. And this is totally adjustable. You can move this in and out. You can loosen these screws off and move this arm back and forth. It does come with boring bars. You got a heavy bar, skinnier bar, and then of course another left turn bar. Now, whether you know it or not, they don't make left-handed hollowing tools. All the hollowing tools I've ever seen are right-handed only. So anyway, you can adjust this in the back, and that will put more pressure to keep this from torquing when it goes into the wood. It's actually a very good system. I really wish there was a left-handed option out there in the market. Maybe I should start making them, I don't know. Anyway, it's really cool. You'll see the laser will actually fall off the edge of the wood, and then that way you know you've got your 1 inch wall thickness. I could take that a little skinnier, and I still might. But anyway, this is our deepest one, so I figured that I would show this one at least. But anyway, it's a cool system. It doesn't take a lot of strain to use it, and you know, I can typically use it maybe on this side of the lathe, and since I can move my controller, I can set it up on the lathe, and that makes things more comfortable as well. But anyway, I'm going to show a little bit of this. It's going to be really hard to look inside this while it's going on, but I'll do what I can. So yes, you can stand on the other side of the lathe when you're using a setup like this, but you can't see the cutter, or you can't see the laser, I should say. So you pretty much have to use it right-handed. But you're working with thin grain here. This is all in grain, so it cuts quite nicely with scrapers. Of course, keeping the urn or the hollow form free of shavings is important. That way things don't get bound up. And you can see the laser just comes over the edge, and then as soon as I see it basically fall off the edge, then I know I've got my 1 inch thickness. It's army proof, like we used to say. And before I get any hate mail about that army comment, I did 24 years in the Canadian Army, so I know what army proof means. And you've probably heard me make some comments about my bad back, and I've got a fake hip. The great thing about the system is you can pretty much stand upright, and you're not bent over trying to look inside the hollow form when using it. So it's easier on your back as well. So if you haven't got one of these systems, I do recommend getting it. And as you can tell, I'm a one-way fan. So as we get near the bottom, I'm going to actually move this out this way. I'm finding it's having a little hard time working, so hopefully just by moving this cutter out will work, and then I'll adjust the laser as well. There, I'm going to put the cutter more like that, and you should be able to get hopefully into the bottom a little more. I'm not going to measure it, that's probably good enough. Sure it's directly across from the cutter. Lock it down. Anyway, this cutting arm here, I mean, it's really starting to vibrate as it gets further. The further you get off of the tool rest, the more vibration you're going to get. So let's hopefully think that everything goes good here. I mean, we're not far before we're done anyway. Yeah, the great thing about this system, I'm assuming it's the same for most hollowing systems, that cutter, you can move it around and place it wherever you want. You can even put it straight in off the end of the cutter. Anyway, it's just a really good setup. I do have a bigger boring bar, thicker, heavier one. And I think if they had have made these boring bars that I'm using here a little thicker, it certainly would have been better too. Make sure you check your chuck from time to time. It hasn't loosened off.
so there you go. Really can't see much in there, can you? Anyway, it's not pretty inside, and it doesn't need to be because this is going to be dried and then it'll be redone.
Unless you're practicing, I don't really see the need to make your roughed out turnings all pretty. It's all going to be turned away once it's dried, so I don't really understand the concept of spending a lot of time to pretty up your wood turnings before they go into the drying shed, unless you're practicing. If that's the case, then by all means. Green wood is fun to work with. It cuts way easier than dry wood, and that certainly is one way to work on your skill level. But for me, I would just sooner just get them roughly roughed out to the thickness I want, seal them, and throw them in the shed to dry. In other words, get her done. Well, that's it. We're all done, finally. I just got to do a few of these. I might leave these smaller ones just the way they are and put them in the drying shed. But all the big bowls have been done. Again, that's going to go into the kiln just the way it is. And of course, that'll be a resin pour. And yeah, huge butternut, walnut, ash, and of course, our hickory, supposedly hickory. Of course, our urns, they're all done. Well, roughed out anyway. This one's going to be neat with resin. I'll be doing another pour with, try to fill this in with resin in the future after it dries out. But yeah, of course, that cool little core from that box elder burl. Anyway, let's finish this up. All right, that's it for the video. I realize this was maybe geared towards beginners. I know a lot of people are really curious how things are made. And again, you know, this is the backbone of every woodturner's business. You know, very few people actually really know how a wooden bowl is made. And you know, one of the goals of doing these videos is to show people how these bowls are made. And it doesn't just magically appear. There's a lot of work that goes into a wood turn. And you know, you'll look at one at a show and you'll pick it up and it may be $200 or $300 and you go, wow, that's a lot of money. But you know, the thing is, you look at the amount of hours and labor involved in making these beautiful bowls. You know, that's one of the goals of me doing these videos. Again, balance is a big thing. This is a good example of balance. It's got spikes, you know, that are even across the top. It's not like this or like this. Even this low part is actually very balanced as well. Looks very cool. And again, this is the box elder burl. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. But it is light and dried out, and it's going to actually take a ton of resin to make it happen. So I'm not sure what we're going to be doing with a bunch of these. But I got a bunch that's almost pretty much dry. I might even be able to do a video next week. I don't know. We'll have to see. So yeah, I mean, that's it. I did a rough calculation. There's probably close to $8,000 in finished product sitting there on that bench. And of course, that's when they're all done and ready for sale. You know, it's just a lot of, as wood turners, you're thinking a year ahead. What are people going to want next year? And it's tough to run a business like that. That's why it's good to have a good variety of bowls so that you can go to a drying shed and pick out something that needs to be done that somebody wants. Don't forget to comment. We're going to, again, pick from the comments for the next giveaway bowl at 25,000 subscribers. I still haven't made that bowl yet, but it will be made on this channel so that you can kind of get a unique piece. Again, our sponsors in the description down below, sandpaper, sandpaper.ca, Starbond Adhesives, and of course Designer Epoxy. Don't forget to check out them in the description down below for your discount codes. And come on back next week for something awesome, hopefully. Anyway, again, if you've turned some hickory, let me know if you think that's what that is. And I would really appreciate that.
Till then, take care, stay safe. Don't forget that thumbs up and don't forget that bell, you know, when I put up a new video. See you next week.